Meg from Natural England is going to introduce the subject about accessibility with a focus on toilets to kick off with.
Great, thank you. I'll just share my presentation with you now. Could you let me know when you can see it?
Yep.
Yeah? Great. Okay. So as I said, Meg, I work at Natural England. Sadly, public toilets are not my job. This is just a sort of passion of mine, one of my personal interests. My background is in landscape architecture, and previously I worked at Sustrans, the sustainable transport charity. And in all of my jobs, I've spent a lot of time sort of raising awareness about the importance of public toilets and the lack of them as a barrier for people getting out and about. So thinking about barriers, there's lots of different ways to understand what these are based on the place that you're talking about. But I like to broadly think about this as the tangible and intangible. A partner of ours at Natural England, Tranquil City, did some research into what makes urban green spaces more attractive to users. And they turned their findings into some lovely infographics, including this one. And I think it speaks to some of the more tangible ways to improve access. So things like wider paths, ramps, good surfacing, no litter, etc. And the Included Outside series brings this evidence together in one place. So this allows practitioners to consider the needs of different groups that are often underrepresented and to build on previous experiences of how these needs have been tackled. It also highlights the importance of intersectionality, the ways in which social identities and related inequalities, for example, race, class, and age, overlap and intersect. And the cross-cutting barriers that were identified in this were a lack of nearby quality green space, personal safety concerns, a lack of partnership working with organisations run by or with underrepresented groups, and limited supportive infrastructure such as toilets, picnic spaces, that aim to build nature space confidence and like routine usage. And so I want to zoom in, as I said, on just one of these barriers to show how impactful each element can be. So we're going to look at toilets. So what do toilets have to do with green spaces? No matter your age, background, or identity, your body has some basic needs. And yet the infrastructure to support those needs, especially when we're outside enjoying nature, is often missing. Public toilets might not be the most glamorous topic in the world, but it is essential. They're about more than convenience. They're about who gets to enjoy the outdoors and how long they get to stay. They affect our health, our dignity, and our freedom to be present in the landscape. So, according to the Mayor's Office, public toilet provision in London has fallen by 75% since 1960. And almost 100 of the capital's public toilets have closed over the last 10 years, according to new research by Age UK. The charity published a report earlier this year that warns that the issue is a serious public health concern and reveals that the last decade has seen around 3 times as many public toilets being shut or removed by councils as were opened by them. At the same time, we've seen growing awareness around the importance of mental health, nature connection, and equitable access to the countryside and nature. So if we care about making nature accessible to everyone, we need to care about toilets. We've probably all experienced being caught out needing the toilet and not being able to find one. It is a fairly universal experience. But for some people, this inconvenience becomes a genuine barrier to leaving the house or accessing natural spaces at all. So the people who are most impacted are people with disabilities, women, older people, children, pregnant people, trans and non-binary people, parents and carers, homeless people. And these are just some of the groups who are more likely to struggle when toilets aren't available or accessible or safe. So these different groups might be impacted differently. Looking at a couple of them in more detail. So women generally need toilets more often. They spend more time in them on average and are more likely to be managing the needs of other people too, including children, older relatives, disabled people. Menstruation also adds another element, with around 1 in 4 women of childbearing age needing period care at any time. Then there's the 25% of the UK population with a disability, including many invisible disabilities. We have about 1 in 5 people in the UK living with a form of IBS. And then even when toilets do exist, they might not be accessible due to steps or locks or poor signage, or also sharing with baby changing stations, which then reduces the availability. And then also gendered toilets can block carers from being able to support someone of a different gender. And then also we have trans and non-binary people, where the issue becomes one of personal safety. In one study, 68% of trans people reported verbal harassment in public toilets, and nearly 1 in 10 experienced physical assault. So even finding a toilet could come with fear, uncertainty, and risk. And these are just some of the groups who may be disproportionately affected. These are quite common lived experiences. And so when we don't include toilets in green spaces, we're effectively telling certain people you're not welcome to stay. So when we talk about access to nature, we often think about physical proximity, so to parks or green belts or woodlands, coastlines. But access is also about whether someone feels comfortable, welcomed, and supported in those spaces. There's many different barriers to accessing nature. So lack of public transport, financial constraints, safety concerns, also just not seeing yourself represented in those spaces. Toilets might not seem like an obvious one, but it's one of the most sort of quietly significant barriers, in my opinion. Because if there isn't a toilet nearby, many people just simply won't go. And that goes beyond mere inconvenience. Spending time in nature, as we've already discussed, supports physical health, reduces anxiety and depression, helps build a sense of community and belonging. So toilets are a massive part of that equation. And when toilets are missing, certain groups are pushed out. People start planning their outings, if they go at all, based on where they know a toilet is. And if there isn't one, they stay home, and that's exclusion. So these are a few example headlines. We've got disabled pensioner wets himself after being unable to find a toilet, public hygiene issues from COVID to toilet closures, public outrage after Paula Radcliffe urinated during a marathon. These stories tell us that we're uncomfortable with the realities of our basic needs, and we're shocked and horrified at the results when toilets aren't available. So what is the cost of ignoring the problem? Many people are planning their time outdoors not around nature, but around toilets. And when they can't find a space that offers both, they stay home. That's not about preference, it's about survival, dignity, peace of mind. And this kind of exclusion isn't distributed evenly. It lands hardest on the very communities that already face systemic barriers to outdoor access. So disabled people, people from ethnic minority backgrounds, low-income households. Lack of toilet provision deepens inequality in ways that often go unnoticed because they're rarely discussed. And then there's also a public health cost. When people feel the need to hold it in, they put their bodies at risk of UTIs, dehydration, gastrointestinal stress. And then there's also the emotional toll, anxiety of not knowing where you'll go, the shame of an accident, the decision fatigue of managing your own body. So we have to shift our thinking to frame toilets as not just amenities, but they're enablers of well-being and dignity and full participation in public life. So tools like the Great British Public Toilet Map are a great starting point. If you're not familiar with this map, it's available online and shows public toilets on top of an OS map. It can be a bit out of date and it relies on people updating the information, but it's a good starting point. We can use this to plan trips, inform our projects, and also just share with others who might benefit. But awareness alone isn't enough. We need action. So Age UK are, as part of their report, they're calling on local authorities, the Mayor's Office, TfL, and central government to take urgent action to improve public toilet provision. Their recommendations include improving public information, developing public toilet strategies, calling on the government to ensure councils have the funding to ensure a sufficient level of provision, and supporting community toilet schemes. And I also think innovation is our friend. So compost, dry, vacuum, and squat toilets can reduce strain on sewage infrastructure. Um, Self-cleaning toilets like those in Berlin and Japan can reduce the strain on cleaning staff. Strategic placement as well isn't just about convenience. It can be used as a management tool to encourage footfall on certain trails or areas and protect more sensitive areas, guiding people with, the promise of a toilet. So yeah, toilets aren't just about sanitation. They can be about agency and dignity and shaping a more inclusive relationship with our green spaces. So what happens when we actually invest in better toilet provision? The first and most obvious thing is unlocking access. Toilets make nature feel safer and more possible for disabled people, older adults, pregnant people, families. For many groups, reliable facilities are the difference between staying home or being able to go out and enjoy the outdoors. And it's also about freedom, like the freedom to stay longer, travel further, be spontaneous. When public toilet infrastructure is in place, it lifts that mental and physical burden from everyone, not just those with specific access needs. There's also benefits for land managers and local communities too. So fewer people urinating or defecating in the landscape means less mess, less damage, and improves public health. It's a way of reducing antisocial behaviour by creating systems that work rather than punishing those who are left with no options. And it also has a knock-on effect, reducing health impacts of holding in urine, for example, and exploring more sustainable technologies could reduce pressure on aging sewage infrastructure and curb wastewater pollution. So in the end, toilets unlock inclusion, health, dignity, and stewardship. They're not glamorous, but they're powerful. And toilets might not be the first thing we think of when we imagine beautiful or wild places, but maybe they should be, because yeah, at the heart of it all is just the simple idea that everyone deserves the right to go and the right to stay. So I think that we should stop treating toilets as an afterthought and start seeing them as a building block of equity and inclusion and part of access to nature for everyone. And this is a little visual that I mocked up of my dream future for nature. Thank you.
Okay, do you want
That was great,
to
thanks.
take down the screen? Okay. So thank you for that, Meg. That was really thought-provoking and important stuff. I mean, toilets is just one example of how to make our sites accessible and attractive and practical for people to be able to use and to stay for long periods of time, not just about, visiting, but also staying for a long period of time. But what I suggest first is that we have questions and contributions specifically about toilets and public toilets, and then we'll open up to a wider discussion about other aspects of how to make our sites more accessible to all sections of the community. So, but before we do open up to questions and contributions, just wanted to say, obviously every site is different. Some of the people here may be a friends group for a very small pocket park or a woodland where a public toilet is not a practical option. But still we need to think about it as an issue, maybe thinking about adjacent buildings nearby, cafes and pubs, and about, there are schemes in certain boroughs to try to get buildings that have toilets to make them accessible to the public, not just to those who are actively using those buildings. So there's a whole range of issues. But anybody want to ask any questions initially of Meg about her presentation? Just sort of wave your hands about. So, Phil.
I was just going to say thank you, Meg. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great presentation and very inspiring. I was quite interested to kind of find out, have you got any really good case studies of where groups have kind of used creative solutions around toilets that have really worked? Is there kind of anything out there that of good practice, if you like, that other groups could learn from?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and something I have been wanting to do for a while now. Unfortunately, I don't have a list of like a sort of case study pack to hand, but it is something that I am very interested in putting together. So I would be happy to share that as and when I gather them.
Yeah, when you've got that information, I can send it to our newsletter list. I think that would be really useful.
I mean, there may be examples that we can share from those who are attending today. Certainly, my park, we had my park 20 years ago was in a shocking state, no facilities and hardly any usage. It's been transformed largely with £4 million of lottery funding. This is a Lordship Recreation Ground in Tottenham. But a key thing that we wanted when we did our initial surveys was cafe and toilets. And I think cafes are a big option for getting toilets installed in spaces that otherwise would not support a standalone public toilet. So it's made a dramatic difference in Lordship Rec. We now, from survey counts, we know that 3 times as many people access the park as before, and also they stay much longer. Sometimes all day, because there's a cafe and there's public toilets as part of that. So has anybody else got any other examples that they want to share?
Tim's got his hand up.
Yeah, there was a question rather than an example.
Okay, go on then.
I was just wondering, Meg, if you have any data that is pertinent to London. I would imagine we've probably lost more public toilets in London than many other parts of the country over the past few years.
Yes, I think the stat for the country since 1960 off the top of my head, I think is 50% closure, but in London it's 75%. So it's been bad everywhere, but it's been even worse in London.
Yeah. We had our big charity fundraiser a couple of weeks ago, beginning of June, London Open Gardens, and one of the instructions to all of our volunteers, 100 plus gardens, was to check out where the local toilets were, because that's one of the main questions people ask when they're visiting. Sadly, on the day, a lot of the central London toilets that we were aware of were closed because of the rehearsals for the Trooping of the Colour, and they were deemed a security issue. So even though we knew where they were and we were directing people to them, when they got there was nothing to use, which was really disappointing for us, but I would imagine possibly catastrophic for many others.
Okay, Tarek.
Yeah, can I just say I went to many parks, and most toilets are very difficult to get through, especially like small toilets. And I've been to so many disabled toilets, and they're very difficult when driving my wheelchair around. Especially maneuvering inside with the electric wheelchair.
Yeah. I also think the term accessible toilet is not misleading. Obviously there's a reason for it, but what is accessible to different people can mean something very different depending on your needs. So it's really hard to make a toilet that is actually accessible to everyone and different groups. So yeah, it can be still very unpredictable when you get an accessible toilet, what that will actually look like on the inside and what the provision will be.
Yeah.
David?
How do I get this hand
Just
off?
take my mic off. Yeah, I've had numerous occasions in both boroughs of Lewisham and Greenwich. In Lewisham, the big problem is that in the big parks, yes, they've got these toilets where the contractors are doing them. They're not particularly necessarily good, but they're available for it. In fact, one toilet, I had to use the disability toilet in one of the parks, because it's the only toilet that had toilet paper in, basically had that you could actually use. And when you actually sat down, the toilet roll holder, this is an accessible toilet, was way away from where the disabled person was. I was able to get hold of it, obviously, but a person with a disability wouldn't have been able to do that. The other problem we've had is that depending on the cafes, we've had a cafe that's been closed for a long period of time, and they put down the shutters on the outside of the male and female toilets. Fortunately, when they were in the park, they did have the shutters up for the disability toilet, and I had a radar key which I could use. The next problem then was on entering that toilet, the lighting was only operable from the cafe, which is closed. So you have to get forget your dignity. Yeah, if you need to go, you had to open the door, get some light there, and have somebody keep cave. While you're in there. But that's obviously okay for me. But for somebody with a disability, going into a dark place with a wheelchair and so on and so forth is not feasible. You just cannot get these councils to understand, unless they are forced to use a toilet. I had in Greenwich, I had a councillor actually told me, go home and use your toilet. When I pointed out that you get to a certain age and you need to, despite all your precautions and everything else, you need to go to the toilet. And they were complaining about poo in the park and all this thing. And I said, well, I'm not condoning it, but you've got to understand it, that if the toilet facilities aren't there in the park, then what do you do if you're caught short? It just, it really does annoy me. It's that they keep on saying, well, we keep the disability toilets shut because of antisocial behaviour, because anyone can get a radar key. Well, that's no excuse. That's not a reason to not provide a toilet in the park. Children's playground. The children couldn't use the toilets because the shutters were down there. It's so frustrating. We had I attended a meeting of the Greenwich things where we had a lot of park users there and an extremely large number of councillors. And of course, as soon as I raised the business of toilets, it's snigger, 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 and I was trying to desperately get over to them that they keep on closing these toilets in the park rather than trying to go round and get a solution to it. When I go up to Newcastle, they've got a reserve there which has got one of these combustible toilets, which is fantastic. It's good for the environment. It's good for there's a win-win situation in that. Obviously, they're manned there. The parks these days are our particular biggest park in Greenwich is open ever since the developers built this Kidbrooke Village. The parks have given up on the gates. There are no more locked gates or anything like that at all. So of course the park is vulnerable to antisocial behaviour. The safer neighbourhood teams of the police can't police these parks effectively because they're short of things.
David, should we give Meg a chance to come back on some of those points?
I was just trying to sort of illustrate, if you like. I mean, I think you get the picture, basically, that the councils aren't interested in providing toilet facilities for people. Yes, Meg, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if you had a specific question there, but on the point around local authorities being scared of antisocial behaviour, I do think the counter argument to that is that, like you say, that by not providing toilets, there's another type of antisocial behaviour, or what would be deemed in their view as antisocial behaviour, because there's a risk of people just going to the toilet anywhere. And so at least by providing toilets, it's a contained and sort of predictable place that they have a slightly more control over, and also from a public hygiene perspective, that like it's much safer for everyone involved. I also think in terms of like, I understand like the cost issue, and I think that's part of Age UK's campaign is around like asking for better funding from the government and for local authorities to actually be able to invest in that good toilet infrastructure, and that is obviously required. That's part of why I am interested in those alternative toilet provisions as well, that use less that cost less, they use less like water resource and that sort of thing, which I think could maybe be a bit out there for some people, but I think it would be worth exploring to be able to provide like a higher number of toilets. But I think it would take sort of a cultural shift in the country as a whole to get there.
Don't you think that the cost of employing somebody in the toilets far outweighs the cost of the antisocial behaviour? If you're forking out £40,000 or £50,000 to combat antisocial behaviour, when you can employ somebody, let's just say for £20,000 for the sake of argument. I mean, I'd like them to get more, but I don't know what the figures are these days. But it's getting the councils to realise that this is costing volunteers as well a lot of things in countering antisocial behaviour in the parks there. If they had a presence in the park there, like they had in the old days, it would be conducive to having, the more people that use the parks, the less antisocial behaviour you're going to get, because people are going to be aware of antisocial behaviour. If you
David, I'm going to
park,
jump in again.
Yes, please do.
That's a really good point, and I was going to bring that up a bit later on about staffing. But Tim, Laura, and Sean want to come in next.
No problem at all.
Tim.
Hi. I was just wondering if, rather than trying to get our councils to spend money on something like this or invest in new infrastructure, which is highly unlikely as they're cutting staff and services everywhere, would there be more mileage in campaigning for pubs, cafes, restaurants, all those places around the parks to be obliged to open up their toilets to people, having that as a sort of legal obligation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, it's an interesting area, and I think I do agree personally. I feel like businesses should have more of an obligation to open toilets up for people. I know there's been a few different sort of local campaigns in different areas to do similar. There's been various different schemes around that, and getting badges and business windows and things like that to say that their toilets are accessible. And I think there's been varied sort of reviews of those from the businesses involved. I think some have had problems or felt like that it's caused problems for them in their toilets. So I think there would need to be sort of it would need to be done gently and in collaboration with businesses, rather than feeling like it was forced on them, to make sure that it was actually taken up successfully and didn't feel like it was something that they were being forced to do and that they wanted to push back against. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that would look, but I think doing some sort of like co-designed process with businesses to do that would be probably the best approach, in my opinion.
Okay, Laura, then Sean.
Yeah, so I just want to pick up a few things from the chat, and also that people have been emailing. So one person mentioned that for some people, not being able to access the toilet can actually trigger life-threatening conditions. So just highlighting the severity of the importance for some people. So obviously it's incredibly important. Pitt from Canizaro Park asked about, sorry, I'm just going to revert to my email now for a second, that the toilet had been maintained by the local authority, but then they stopped doing that. And so now the Friends group there has refurbed it and has also been tasked with cleaning it and maintaining it. And I'm sorry, just to say, Pitt can't speak because of problems with the computer, but so just, you know, flagging that is
where is that, Laura?
in Merton. Yeah, in Merton.
Which
So
park though? Which park?
Cannizzaro Park.
Okay.
They might not want us to be talking about specifics, but anyway, yeah, just to flag that, where friends groups are given responsibility for cleaning and maintaining toilets. That's a very big ask. Yeah, that's a hard one to have. And then I've got another one after that, if you've got any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I agree. It is a big ask, and I don't think it is fair that volunteers should have to pick up the responsibility. I do think there needs to be better investment from government and local authorities. Obviously, in the current situation, like as we are, where there are groups doing that, I think it's amazing where people are willing to do that and volunteer to do that. But yeah, I don't think that's right that it should just be picked up by volunteers. It does need, and because that's not a long-term sustainable solution, and people are going to get pretty sick and burnt out from doing that, and it needs some proper infrastructure in place.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
And then Eleanor mentioned so you know, there's the Fix My Street for yeah, for things like litter and fly tipping and, you know, broken facilities and things. And could that be used for toilet provision for flagging up problems, to yeah, sort of help yeah, help with keeping toilets maintained and usable.
Yeah, definitely. I think where we could incorporate technology to make life easier, especially if it helps, you know, reduce the pressure on local authorities and helps them to identify where there's problems faster, then yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, Eleanor, you were going to say something, weren't you? Have you dropped your hand now? Okay, Sean then, and then is it Ty? Yeah, Sean first then.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything really that's been said. We have similar problems. That the problem seems to be that we can't. There's no obligation at all on the part of local authorities to provide toilets, public toilets, whether in parks or on the streets or anywhere. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, despite the giggles and everything else that it encourages. We were promised in a recent paper about 2-3 years ago, a blue and green strategy paper, cafes and toilets in every park. And as far as I can tell, nothing's happened. We as volunteers and the cafe in the park do try and maintain our rather dilapidated toilets, but it's a real hand-to-mouth existence, finding the materials. And when the drains are clogged, then we have to get the council in, because that's not something we can do. And it's rather like the parks themselves. The authorities are not under obligation to have parks or to maintain them. And sorry, noisy dog. And I think so. We've got the local situation, which we can, to a certain extent, deal with volunteers and pressure on councils. But I think we've got to look at the wider situation of the obligation that is placed upon councils by government to actually do something about this, for all the reasons that were given, right, by our speaker. These are serious problems that are just swept away because councillors have nice, warm, well-equipped council buildings. As far as I can tell, they don't really go out into the parks and have to deal with the realities. But it's essential if people are going to make use of our parks, especially the parks that are slightly more distant from the homes.
Yes. Okay. Good points. Ty, do you want to come in?
Hi. So I'm sort of representing the Friends of Beckton Park. We're in Newham. So one of our biggest problems at the moment is that we actually have the infrastructure. We have an abandoned cafe and building. We used to have a fully working farm that had provisions there. Newham Council have had budget cuts after budget cuts, all have been closed down. So we have no toilet facilities whatsoever. There is none. On top of that, we have lack of bins. We have lack of everything. And Beckton in Newham is a very neglected area when it comes to funding in any which way whatsoever. And our biggest problem is actually getting councillors to even engage with us. They just won't. They won't engage, and we've recently just started a more official Friends of Beckton Park group, which, I'm part of. I am disabled myself. I'm a wheelchair user. I have a stoma, so I'm one of the people that, I need these toilets. We have extensive parkland here. It wraps around the whole of Beckton, and I've had to empty my stoma bag into doggy poo bags over the park. That, for my dignity, that's not right. It's not right, and the councillors, they're not hearing us, they're not listening, and we don't know how to force them to engage with us, because when we're trying to approach them, their defences are up, and it's just, we're hitting brick walls. And it's, we have the infrastructure. We're slowly making small progress with, the building that we have that used to be a cafe, but it's been abandoned for 20 years. 20 years is a long time for an abandoned cafe. And even when it does get opened, I think the councillors have agreed for one toilet in there. And it's like, that's not really good enough. And again, we're down to the, how are we going to maintain this? Again, the antisocial behaviour, and our parks are, it's, we are finding feces everywhere in the park, you know what I mean? And it's, nothing is we have a great team of volunteers that do litter picking weekly. We have a great volunteer litter picking group, and they're amazing, but it's, why is it down to us to be doing this? It's when the councillors are just not hearing it. And yeah, we just don't know how to get them to engage on accessibility in any form. It's the pavements, the everything.
Yeah, thank you, Ty. That's good points. Phil, if you have the last word, and I'm going to sort of say a few things, and then we'll ask Meg to kind of sum up, and then we'll move on to other stuff. So
sorry,
Phil.
I was on mute. I didn't realize. Can I just respond really quickly to Ty?
Oh, yeah, go on.
I just want to say, I think I've been exchanging emails with some of your colleagues in the Friends group, and so let me pick this up again. I think the last message was to ask if the council had responded to the emails that you'd sent. So I'm gathering the answer is no. I've found it's been a little bit more difficult, perhaps, like in the last couple of years, to engage with the officers at Newham as well. So, but I do know some groups, and I know you've been in touch with some. So perhaps we can take it offline in the next few days to see if there's perhaps anyone that I can put you in touch with who might be able to help you, like other local Friends groups. But also, the Beckton parks, they cover a huge geographical area, and like kind of like end to end, that's for only, if there was only one toilet, that really would not be enough. Just to say, let's continue speaking offline and hopefully get somewhere.
Okay, fantastic. And if anyone needs to put their contact details in the chat, please do so, or communicate with each other. Phil, do you want to say any points? Add any points?
Really quickly, it's quite hard to follow, Ty, because I really feel for you. What you were describing there. It sounds like quite a tricky situation. I was just really going to go back to kind of, Meg's kind of point around, toilets do need to be front and center. And I think sometimes they are forgotten. And it's that thing of actually they're often the little forgotten space in a park. And, you know, I think in the past I've had that situation where I've almost dreaded going to the loo because you don't know what you're going to come across. And I think the thing that came to my mind was we just need more glamour around our park toilets. And it's like, you know, I think when you go out for a really nice meal and you go to someone that's got fantastic toilets, you're like, oh, wow, that was an incredible washroom, and you really remember it. And I don't see why we can't be doing that with our parks. It's like, you know, the RHS give out awards for, you know, blooming communities. If we could do that around public facilities in parks, I think there's a real project there. I think there could be something quite exciting. And I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of local councillors and local authorities, they are competitive. And I think if you can do something really exciting that kind of pushes the boundaries in one borough, you'll get the other boroughs saying, why the hell aren't we doing this? Let's put some money there and try and make it happen. So I think there could be a quite exciting project here, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, perhaps it's something that we could link in with Parks for London as well, because they do obviously like report and, you know, rank on council's performances in various areas.
So I'm just going to say a few things in terms of what we've tried to do in Haringey, and then Meg, if you want to sort of just sum up where we go from here, really. Yeah, there's been a couple of efforts over the last 15 years to get a borough-wide toilet scheme, cafes and pubs to sign up to a toilet scheme, have a sticker outside. It's been managed by councils with support from the Federation of Residents Associations in Haringey. And then more recently, I think the Parks Forum started lobbying around that issue as well. I have to say it hasn't been successful. I mean, I think there was an early start to a scheme and it kind of fizzled out. So there has to be real commitment to developing it over a period of years and building up the number of pubs and cafes that sign up to it. I think originally Haringey Council would pay a small amount per year to a cafe, you know, so that they could be, be registered as part of the scheme. Did they pay? I think they did. And councils now are so cash strapped. Anything that costs is going to be, you know, really hard to get in. So in my park, yeah, we lobbied hard for a cafe, which we did through the lottery with match funding from the council. We run the building. It's a community centre and cafe. As I said, it's made a dramatic difference. We've got effectively 4 public toilets, including a disabled toilet in there. It's hard work running a building, but it's very empowering, and I do recommend it. But one thing that's come up is that the council's managed to get a grant for a changing place unit. A changing place unit is for people with extreme mobility challenges who need a hoist to use a toilet, and it also has a showering facility inside it. So it's only for people that need that specialist facility. We're going to get one next to our community centre cafe in the middle of our park. Costs about £90,000, but there may be grants available. You know, sometimes councils can get capital funding, but they haven't got any revenue funding to manage facilities. So if it can be placed next to an existing independently run facility, then it's potentially an option that can be lobbied for. I just want to say that the council did bring in a policy, Haringey Council, a few years ago, that if a cafe, a cafe was willing to make its toilets public in a park, or there was a public toilet in the park that the cafe would take on the maintenance of, then they would get a reduction of their rent if it was a private cafe. So that was built into the kind of lease arrangements. So there are ways of kind of, trying to get these existing toilets or future toilets maintained, not by the council. I think getting the council to maintain a public toilet in these current climates is really hard. However, I do want to say that we should all be pushing for more funding for public services generally and for parks in particular. And that's why it's vital to build up borough-wide friends forums, the London-wide network of friends groups, and indeed the national federation, which I'm the chair of. And there's 7,000 friends groups around the country. And we should be shouting and screaming for more resources for local authorities to manage their parks, because ultimately that's what's going to make the difference across the board. And it's really peanuts. The amount of funding that goes into parks from central government is peanuts. And it could be doubled and trebled. They wouldn't even notice central government. It's about £1 billion a year are spent by local authorities on parks management. And, that should be trebled. That is peanuts in the scheme of things. So the money and resources are there, but they're not being put into public services at the moment. So, Meg, do you want to just say a few final words and then we'll move on to other stuff?
Thank you. Well, I mean, I feel like you've heard enough from me, but it's been really nice to hear the discussion and to hear from everyone and to hear about your experiences with your own parks. I have seen the comments in the chat. For some reason, I'm not able to like the messages or respond to them. But I am making a note of everyone's email addresses and of all the points that everyone's raised. Like I said, this isn't my job, but I am very passionate about it. I am halfway through writing a PhD proposal on this topic. Also still need to actually find someone to fund it. But in the dream world where that does come true, I would like to incorporate all of these things that you guys have raised. So yeah, thank you so much. I will drop off now, I think, and let you guys have your internal discussion. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
so much.
Yes.